Okay. So, good morning po, sir. Ako po, Shervan Nickolai, Dabu, and magko-configure po tayo ng VLANs for trunking and switch configuration. Then naman, onti lang for, routing para ma-route yung data from PC3 to PC1 using VLANs. Inter-VLAN communication, basically. So, paano natin gagawin yun? May setup BACDO na tayo, setup commands tayo dito. But for now, start yun sa 0. Ulit tayo sa way naka-umpisa. So, ang muna kailangan natin gawin is mag-setup ng VLANs for both PC1 and PC3 sa different interfaces nila. Dapat naka 2 different VLANs sila. So, in the activity, we're going to use VLAN 10. Okay, naglalago. I'm going to use VLAN 10 for the fast Ethernet 011 and VLAN 30 for 06 yata kung hindi ako nagkabaliktad. Yep. Okay, ayan natin. So, gagawa lang muna tayo na we're just going to make VLANs for now. Okay, VLAN 10. We're not supposed to name them. Just exit immediately. VLAN 30. So, we have already made 2 VLANs already. Oh. Now, what we're going to do next is assign them to the ports. As per activities, I have to follow this. I have to assign them to the different ports. We already know how this works. Let's just see progress at 16%. You have to assign them into different ports using the interface. No, we're not doing gigabit. Forgot about that. Sorry. Fast Ethernet 011. Okay, we're on PC1 now, so assign VLAN 10 to it. So this command specifically does, I just learned this recently, this command just allows access to only the VLANs within the switch. So it doesn't allow communications between another switch if you actually turn this on. If there's data routing from a tagged trunk port, that is, pag may nakatrunk na ibang data na papunta sa switch na yun, hindi pala siya gagana kasi hindi naiintindihan ng switch kung bakit may tag yun, hindi niya i-accept. Kaya may importante pala yung trunking, pero mamaya ano yun. I-buksan lang natin yung switch port. Let's lagyan natin ito ng VLAN. VLAN kan yung first na ginawa natin for PC1. In-shutdown ko lang to. Standard practice ko lang sa sarili ko yan. Just exit na. Ganun din sa kabila for fast Ethernet 06 si PC2. Dalawa PC2. PC3 I mean. Not sure about walang BSIT, but yeah, I'm also the one who created this. The usual. Oops. Okay, now we'll turn on both. The next that we're supposed to do is actually try to ping. But we're gonna have to check it first, huh? Okay, let's check it first. To check, just do show VLAN. See here, you've already created 2 of the VLANs here, VLAN 10 and VLAN 30, assigned to port 11, port 6, as mentioned earlier. Good. We're doing great so far. Okay. So let's try to ping them. So this is not supposed to work because you've assigned a VLAN to them. Technically, it would work if it's on the same interface, and that same interface is on the same switch would have the same VLANs. It would work. But considering that they're in both different VLANs, it's not supposed to work. The only way for them to communicate between different VLANs is to enable trunking, but not just trunking. You have to also enable or use a layer 3 device, a switch or a router, a layer 3 router or layer 3 switch. Because there's some encapsulation and decapsulation of data to send from the switch to the router and back to the switch to the PC. It's kind of like routing in a way, but we're not gonna tackle that for now. I just tried to understand everything, but it didn't really go my way. Wait, what PC am I using? PC1, okay. Let's ping PC3. 172.17.30.0. That's PC3 if I remember correctly. 172.70.30.0. That is the correct PC, right? It's just not supposed to work. See, dropped the packet immediately since, yeah, it was in a different VLAN. But if they were in the same VLAN, it would work technically because they're in the same switch. But if they were on the different switch with different VLANs, it technically won't work since there's no trunking. Because if you try to send data from a different switch, it won't really understand what that VLAN is because there's a header once it leaves the switch via the trunking port. If that makes any sense. Okay, basta na ako. Yeah, pings were not successful. Ping PC3. Yep, it did now. Yes, it's PC3, right? Okay, yeah, it doesn't work. They work as intended. Let me just check the activity if I did use the right IP address. What? It's a what? You know what? Let's try that again. 172.17.30.10. It was supposed to be 10. I'm not sure why it's 0 there. It's supposed to work. I'm not sure why it's 0 here. Is it? Or is it a default gateway? No, this CIPP. This is a default gateway. I'm not sure why it's done here. But hey, I'm gonna check. Oh, excuse me. I'm gonna check real quick if it is 10 or 0. Okay. Let me just check this. Oh, it is 10. Oh, this is wrong. I want to change it, but I can't. This isn't mine after all. Whoops. Okay, so we're gonna have to move on now. It doesn't work. Yep, that makes sense. So we're gonna have to do enable. Wait, did I miss something? No, I didn't. We're gonna have to enable trunking, and then we're going to have to modify the router to allow routing between the different PCs. If I remember correctly, you're not supposed to trunk the connection between PC3 and PC1 since you're not exactly connected to a different router during switch. You only enable trunking to the switch or to the port that receives the data from the router itself. So only basically gigabit 0, 0. Yep, interface 0, 0 basically for the switch. 0, 1 for the switch, for 0, 0 for the router. I mean, trunking has to work for 0, 1 for switch. But that's probably going to be for later. So for now, let's just continue configuring the router itself. Next just means sub-interface. Yeah, this is just a sub-interface for the actual data packets to receive by the switch later on as we try to move on from a different VLAN. I think I'm lagging with that. Just configure. So that's interface gigabit internet 0, 0, the actual interface, but we're going to input the subs interface, which is that. You can pretty much name this anything you want, but as practice or as standards, a standard is to name the interface the same as the name of the VLAN. So 10 correlates to VLAN 10. You can name this whatever you want, but you would go insane trying to find the same VLAN again to configure this again later on. So it's just best practice. I'm in a sub interface. Now let's turn on the encapsulation command. Now this basically just means that you're trying to encapsulate and decapsulate data. Encapsulating data coming from the trunk port of the switch to the router, and then re-encapsulating the data back to the proper VLAN that it's supposed to go to. Basically decapsulating the VLAN 10 or the 802.1 standard VLAN 10, decapsulates it and re-encapsulates it with VLAN 20's 802.1 so that PC3 can receive it. I'm going to be demonstrating that later, but for now, let's just turn it on. I placed 10 here to signify that it's for VLAN 10, or any type of data packet that comes from VLAN 10 will be the one supposed to decapsulate. It cannot decapsulate anything other than VLAN 10 packets. So I think I'm lagging. Yep, I'm lagging. Whoops. Okay, I turned it on now, I think. Not sure. I'm lagging after all. think that's fine for that. Let's just turn it on for the other sub-interface for VLAN 30, but let's just check for now. Yeah, I forgot to assign an IP address or the default gateway so that the packet actually knows where to go after being decapsulated. Gigabit event 00.10. That's an IP address. Now we're just basically gonna copy this. 172 17.10.1 I think is the default gateway. Yep, that's the default gateway. Just press 255, the usual. Basically just means A/24 network. Okay, exit. We're good with this. Now time for the other interface. On the same interface, we're going to have to go to another sub-interface, which is 30. You can name this anything you want, but it's standard practice to name it the same as the VLAN. Okay, encapsulation. .q10, that just basically means 802.1q. It's kind of like the header that gets encapsulated when leaving a trunk port and gets decapsulated when going to the router. So this is gonna be 30. This signifies the VLAN actually. It's supposed to accept. This part of the sub-interface can only accept VLAN 30s. It's the same as the other one only for VLAN 10s. Okay, we're good with this. Let's just assign an IP address to it now. 172.17. I think it's 0.30 or 0.30.1. That's the default gateway. So it knows where to send it to when there's nothing in the local network. 172.17.10. 0.30. Just making sure I typed it in right. Okay, we're good with this. Now we've turned on both. Basically, it's completed. So we're basically going to try to. We're basically just going to try to pick. I think. Yep, we're going to try to ping after turning on the sub-interface first. Okay, so turn on the sub-interface. Go to enable again. Wait a minute, switch. I'm supposed to be here again. Okay, go to the interface B00 because as you can see it's red right now. That just basically means it's turned up. So let's just turn it on by no shutdown. See, turn green. I think we're good for this. Now, it should be set it up, but it's not gonna work. Again, it wasn't trunked. This wasn't trunked. So it's not receiving any data packets outside of its VLAN it's supposed to be. It can't really route it where it's supposed to go to because it doesn't know where it's supposed to go to at all because there's no VLAN. Okay, so let's try to ping. Am I supposed to pick PC1? You're supposed to try to ping PC3 again. So ping PC3 by 172.117, 3.17, and then 0.30.10. That's the IP address of PC3. This should not work since we haven't accepted the trunk ports between the router and the switch. Or we haven't set up the trunk ports yet. See, the data gets immediately dropped since it doesn't really know where to go. I'm just waiting for it to just stop sending data. And yep, it does not work. Okay, so to turn it on, you have to actually enable trunking onto switch 1. Since trunking allows actual communication and reading of headers from the different friends, since this is accepting these packets, or rather not even accepting probably because you haven't turned on trunking yet, because there's no VLAN, it's not accepting any packets. But if you turn on trunking, let's turn on trunking for this particular gigaface internet. Let's just config this. Interface gigabit internet of 01. Now to do this, you have to basically just say switch port mode access. You could technically skip this command, but it's just standard practice. Now this should make us 100% and it should make us work. Now see, if I try to ping it later, it will work. But to explain, basically you've turned it on. Now, whenever you try to send the VLAN to a different, send the packet to a different VLAN, now it will accept it. Since you've trunked the port, the switch will basically look for anything in its own ports as VLAN 10, or if it doesn't find anything on VLAN 10, it will find any trunk ports that are available, which is on gigabit or gigabit, I think gigaface or gigabit interface. Yeah, gigabit Ethernet, I mean. We'll send it to gigabit Ethernet 01 because it's a trunk, and we'll send it back to the router, which encapsulates the data via the command we typed in earlier, encapsulation.q. Encapsulate TAO 2.1 standard, and then we encapsulates it as the same thing but for VLAN 30, which will go back to the trunk port and will be received by PC3. So let's try that out now. Since we're at 100%, it should work now. And everything looks green. So 172.17.30.10. That's the IP address. Now this should work unless of course I typed in the address wrong. Okay, there's something wrong. Okay, never mind. Just take a time to probably just figure it out. It was probably just trying to reroute packets. Let's just try that again. Because it was probably updating the table. Now, as you can see, it's perfectly working. So we've essentially enabled the trunk ports to allow communication between the different PCs, allowing the switch to be able to send data to the router and back to the switch to PC3, allowing communication. Basically, trunking allows the communication from another networking device if it's on a different VLAN, but it can only work to send it to a different VLAN from the same switch if you have this. If you don't have this, it won't be able to send it to a different VLAN. It can only send it to that same VLAN on the same switch. It technically also won't work if you have another switch here on the same VLAN. Let's say this one has VLAN 10 and the other switch here has VLAN 10 as well. It still technically won't work because it doesn't have trunking on. It doesn't know how to leave the local network, especially if that particular trunk port is connected on the switch on a different port. It won't necessarily know where to send it to. Because like I said earlier, it will flood all the VLANs of the same VLAN and the trunk ports. If nothing is trunk, then it will only send it to VLAN 10, only connected to that particular port, and it will just drop the packets because it doesn't know where to send it to. So that's basically how it works. Everything is working now. I think I have 100%. Yep, confirm. Okay. So we're good now. That's it. Bye.